everybody, how are you all doing? I think it's been a week or more since I've been on here. Oh, what a crazy week. So tonight I want to come on and talk to you guys about the stuff that I have been reading the last week or so. Before that, I want to share with you just kind of a small book and gift haul that I just have sitting here that I want to put away, but I had to share it with you guys first. Yeah, it's been a really good but busy week. My daughter and I spent Friday and then Sunday in Fort Smith, which is about an hour and a half south of us. And we were selling some stuff for my Etsy shop at an event. I made a ton of money. I wish that I could find some local events like this more often because I made 3 times what I thought I was going to. So it was really great. We're trying to save for our trip out to Oregon, so that really helped a lot to get that come in. But anyway, that's what we've been doing all weekend. We took Saturday at home, but Friday and Sunday we were there. And just today trying to get back into the swing of things. It's been crazy. But anyway, time to make a video, time to talk to you guys. Hope everybody's doing well. Here are the books and gifts that have come in the last week-ish, couple of weeks that I want to share with you guys. So first off, this just came in today. This is the Sagas of the Icelanders. This is compiled, I don't know, it doesn't say who it's compiled by, but it has a preface by James Miley. And this features a bunch of the different sagas. Next month, April, is Sagalong. You can find out more about that on Vin's channel at Revenant Reads, and I will talk just a little bit more about that in my April plans video. But anyway, I wanted to get this because it contains the 2 sagas that we are going to be reading for Sagalong next month. Then today I had to do a couple of errands, and Sela, my 19-year-old daughter, talked me into taking her to Barnes & Noble. And it's not that I have a problem taking Sela places, it's that I know if I go into Barnes & Noble, I'm going to spend money, and I'm trying to save for Oregon. But I did have some cash in my wallet that the ATM wouldn't take yesterday because I had like so many bills, right? They'll only take a certain amount of bills in a day. And so I was like, okay, whatever cash is in my wallet, I can spend, but nothing off any cards anywhere. So I ended up buying 2 things and a hot cocoa and a piece of lemon loaf. But that's beside the point. This is the next book I bought. This is The Manuscripts Club by Christopher DeHamill. And I am currently reading, he's the one that wrote the Meetings with Remarkable Manuscripts, which I'll talk about in a minute in my reading wrap up. But yeah, this one is about the people, who wrote the manuscripts and stuff. It says the people behind 1,000 years of medieval manuscripts. I am loving the other book by him that I am reading. He is such an engaging writer. He's funny. He's speaking to you in just a very chill sort of way. I don't know. I really like this guy. You will probably recognize him if you look him up, Christopher DeHamill. He's like on all kinds of documentaries, and I didn't really know who he was until I looked him up, and I was like, oh, yeah, I recognize that guy. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to reading this. It may not even be this year, but my Barnes & Noble tends to only carry like 1 copy each of things like this that are sort of niche and kind of nerdy and specialized. I don't know why that is, but I guess they just don't sell a lot of them. And so when I see something like this there, I usually grab it. Like for instance, his other one that I'm reading, there was only 1. The Jane Austen's bookshelf last summer, there was only 1, and they didn't get another one in for months. So when I find something sort of intellectual like that at my Barnes & Noble, I tend to grab it. So I did grab this, and I don't know if I will even get to it this year, but I am kind of on a medieval, deep dive medieval studies, at least for the next year or 2. So I will definitely be getting into this soon. I mean, relatively soon. And then the other thing I got was a copy of Bella Grace. I really like this magazine / I don't know what it is. It's all kind of some art, some poetry, some spaces for your own writing, like this. The topics for this journal are living a poetic life, carrying cozy into spring, 12 magical stores we dream of owning, playing pretend, reframing the everyday, and 90 ways to cultivate an elegant life. So I thought that I just love Bella Grace, and so I grabbed this spring copy, and I'm going to sit down and look at it little by little during quiet, peaceful moments. And as soon as the moment becomes unquiet and unpeaceful, the magazine gets put away until it can be chill time again. All right, then I'll show you a couple of gifts that my husband got me. He got me this paper book. This is from Daphne's Diary, and it's just a bunch of different papers as well as like projects. Daphne's Diary, I believe, is out of Ireland, and it comes to our Barnes and Noble every now and then. And so he's always picking me up a copy of whatever it is that is newest in that Daphne's Diary line. But it's just basically a fun art book, full of all kinds of, project starters. Sometimes there's little booklets included, like here's a recipe book that you can pull out of there. And these are all little cutouts just for crafting and things, tags, and there's paper dolls in here. Oh, I see. It's not actually paper dolls. You can make a robe. You can make a skirt for the doll with the folding paper technique. So just fun, pretty little things. So that was sweet. And then he also got me this puzzle, this flowers puzzle. He likes to buy me flowers, but he said this one would last longer, and that is true. So it's my new puzzle. We're still working on the world of the Brontes, which this is a good month to do that one and finish it, because it's March on the Moors, where we focus on the writings of the Brontes, right? So yeah, I should probably finish that up this month. All right, and the 3 more that I ordered for myself. This one is first going to go to my son, and then it'll go to me. But this is the writings of Bede. So he wrote a history of England during the medieval times. This is on my kids' school lists, right? They've all read at least portions of Bede, and so I decided to finally get the book form because I want to read it, as I said in a very popular video of mine. Yay! I'm starting to do the Ambleside online. It's like our homeschool curriculum. I'm starting to do all of those reading lists for myself. So Bede comes on, I don't know, maybe end of 6th grade, beginning of 7th grade-ish, somewhere in there. 7th grade, I think. And so I'll have a while until I get to it for the reading list, but since I'm on my medieval kick, I very likely am going to at least consult Bede, which I have already done from time to time. I'll at least consult this book, but I'll probably have it read before I get to the 7th grade level, because that's like years from now. Then I got this little book. I can't even remember who recommended it, but I thought I'd read it for middle grade March if I have the time. This is The Glass of Lead and Gold by Cornelia Funk. I think it's like a children's book set in England. This little girl is a mudlarker, and someone wants her to be on the lookout for that particular glass of lead and gold. So it's kind of just a little story about her as a mudlarker and whatever happens with this glass. I have no idea, but it looks good because, I'm into mudlarking. And then finally I got this. This book is called Heart's Ease by Charlotte Mary Young. And I ordered this from Ireland. And I did pay a good amount for it because I wanted it for my collection. I have found that actual publisher printed copies of Heart's Ease are really difficult to find. They must have stopped publishing this a really long time ago, because I can only find a few online. I found lots of reprints, self-publishing houses that, reprint things, print on demand, like on Amazon. I found several copies of it there, but something that was published, back in the day, this one's published by Macmillan, have been really difficult to find. This one I think was published about 20 years after she wrote it. Let me see. Yeah, this is an 1879 copy, so that's about 20-ish years, if I remember right. But one thing I love about it is illustrated by Kate Greenaway, who I adore, if you haven't figured that out yet. So pretty and sweet illustrations. And so I have another, whoa, hello, you guys just had an earthquake. What is my other copy? The Heir of Redcliffe. I have also illustrated by Kate Greenaway. So this was a special thing for my permanent collection. And I am going to read it, and I'm going to read this copy, but I'm probably going to have to read it like on my pillow like this, because there are some pages that are a little bit loose. But anyway, I got this story. It's on my 50 by 50, and the reason why I put it on there is because, and part of it at least, is set in Winchester. And if you guys watched my video back in June where I was at Winchester and I was standing out in the like courtyard area, whatever, the grassy part in front of the cathedral in Winchester, I was reading a passage of this book, Heartsease, and then I kind of recreated the path that the characters took through the cathedral and the things that they looked at, and then like I walked out the door the same way they did. If I remember, I will put it in the description box. You guys can watch that, and I'll kind of like put the little tag, so you know where to start it. But anyway, I wanted to read the full story, and so I got that, and I'm really excited about that. So that is my little book and gift haul. Now I want to talk to you guys about the stuff that I've been reading for the past week or so. All right, so the first book that I have finished is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Bronte. I loved this book. I think this is probably in the top 3 right now for my favorite books so far this year. Now, granted, I've only read about 14 books or 15 so far this year, which is way less than I normally do, but I'm taking my time with some classics that I've been wanting to get into, but felt like if I didn't sort of slow down and really focus, that I wouldn't understand them. And so I really have been reading much slower this year. And I kind of like it, actually. It's getting used to the idea that's kind of been weird, right? But anyway, so I started this. I read her preface to the second edition, where I just like wrote all over this, because she really tells some people off. Which I don't blame her, because her reason for writing this was not to put out a bestseller and gain a lot of notoriety. She really was making a social, political, more social, moralistic sort of statement about women having to live with neglectful husbands, abusive husbands, just the fact that a man could run all over and do whatever, and a woman was sort of just stuck with it, right? And so one of the characters in here faces that kind of a situation. Her husband is very neglectful. He's not physically abusive, from what I can tell, as much as just very emotional abusive, very neglectful of her. He'll take off for months at a time and leave her alone, and he's off partying and, schmoozing around with other women and all kinds of things. And she's just, trying to live a moral life, trying to raise their child. And the way that this issue is dealt with, I think, is probably the most biblical way it could be dealt with. Okay, so I'm going to do something that I learned from Molly. I'm going to give you a spoiler here in a second. And when I'm talking about the spoiler, I'm going to have my hands up like this. Molly did this the other day, and it was so great because you could just mute it if you didn't want to hear the spoiler. And once she was done talking about the spoiler, she just put her hand down. And that was your cue to turn the sound back on. And I was like, that was such a great idea. So I'm going to try to remember to do that when I give spoilers, because I don't personally like spoilers. However, if you don't care, or if you've read the book, I'd really like to engage about some of the things, right? Okay, so the spoiler. What I really loved about this book is that when this woman had finally had enough, her husband had finally just, gone too far, basically, in his neglect and emotional abuse of her. She didn't divorce him. She didn't run away with another man, and she did have the opportunity to run off with someone else. Instead, what she did was she took her son and they went to a safe place. She did not tell him where she was going. They just went to a safe place and stayed there and was looked after by people who cared about her. And then when she found out that her husband was sick and dying, she took her son and they went back and they nursed him through his sickness and through his death. And then she was released, right? And then happy things happened after that. But I think that was probably the most biblical way that she could have handled that situation. She got herself out of a place that was, very, I don't know if it was necessarily dangerous as much as it was just very dangerous for her son and his moral upbringing. And it was just a horrible, negative, yucky environment for her. And so she got herself out of that situation. She separated away, but she never did break her marriage vows. And she had the opportunity a couple of times, a couple of different people that she did care about or that cared about her. But she did not break her marriage vows. She stayed true to her husband, but she just separated herself from the dangerous situation. And then when it came to the time that he was vulnerable and could no longer really hurt her, that's when she went back and she did, what she would call her duty of taking care of him until his death. I just thought that was a fantastic way to handle that. Okay, spoiler done. I love that idea. Thank you, Molly. One thing I really love about this story, and I said this earlier in a different video, but there's no romanticizing of bad behavior. The bad characters are bad. Just because they're good looking, just because they're charming, just because they're rich, just because your mama said so, that doesn't mean that the female character is willing to put up with that bad behavior for the sake of a romantic hero. He is made out to be a very ugly guy. And because he is, right? And then the good characters are good. And I thought it was so great. There was a little bit of preachiness to the main character, but not nearly as bad as Agnes Grey. So that was a good thing. And I thought it was a really well thought out story. We can see in this story the characters that are dealing with certain things, the progression from happiness into apathy, the more neglectful, yucky things are happening. So, they slowly become apathetic. They just don't care. And then they start to isolate, right? And so, people that they once would have spent time with, or things that they once would have enjoyed, hobbies they once would have had, and, life they once would have lived, they start to isolate and they start to just kind of push that stuff aside because this negative, yucky, cancerous sort of life is just eating away at them. And I think the way she portrayed that was so good. It was really great pacing, and it annoys me. And sometimes I get annoyed when people talking about pacing, but now I get it, right? Because it was great pacing for the time it took for characters to sort of degenerate down into what they became. In the preface that I mentioned, Anne talks about this being a warning. She was trying to warn people. She was trying to get the truth of what it's like to live in a negative, neglectful, and maybe even abusive situation. She was trying to get that truth out there, and people picked on her for it. But I think this is probably the best warning I've ever read. Like, if anybody wants to know what their young adult, especially young daughter, should read before marriage, this is the book. This gives you all the red flags, and it also addresses how someone who does deal with maybe like what's the right word I'm trying to think of? Like a gaslighting, manipulative, narcissistic sort of person. It shows you how the person who cares about that narcissistic person, their thought patterns, the things that they think, and the excuses that they make, and the chances, the patience they're willing to give to this person just because of their love for them and their desire that they could change them. If they just love them enough, they will change, right? And it just really addresses that. I think that's so important, especially if you're attracted to bad guys. You got to read this book. You will be outed. But anyway, I really liked it. I think it's probably the best Bronte book that I've read as far as just a overall mature, good story, good storytelling, and not a lot of dramatics and melodrama and stuff. I was really impressed with Anne and her maturity in writing this. It's actually had a lot of it had a pretty modern voice in some parts. So yeah, I'm thinking Anne, right now anyway. Anne's my favorite Bronte. That's weird, because it's been Emily for so long. All right, I spent a lot of time on that one. Let me speed up a little bit. All right, after that, I read Emma and Lion, volumes 1 and 2. I just kind of wanted a refresher on the beginnings of Emma, her coming to her community, and just some of the stuff, that descriptions of her community. And especially in book 1, I picked up on a lot of things that I had missed before. Things like just, quirky decorations on the people's homes, the quirky names of things. I picked up on the fact that her maid Agnes is only 16. That never occurred to me that she's only 16. And just things about the town, like the business sign being hung wrongly, or the reason for the keep in the coffee shop. I had forgotten kind of how that all went down. So I really enjoyed going back through those. I started reading book 3 the other day, and it felt too soon. So I think that I've kind of gotten my refresher about Emma and her world. So I'll just wait now for book 9, as we are all patiently waiting, and go from there. But I did enjoy reading through those two. Over the weekend, while I was sitting at my table, my sales table, I read this, Bronte Country, which is mainly a book of photographs, but also has some commentary. The photographs are all places near where the Brontes lived. And then a lot of times the commentary is just a page like this, but there were some that had quite a bit of text. I found it to be, kind of underwhelming as far as the text goes. There was a lot of quoting from books, hardly anything from Anne, of course, but the quotes didn't really necessarily match the photographs. I don't know. I think that I would have just enjoyed a book of photographs with captions. But I did like it. I did read it. It's a good reference to have. But a lot of the writing was kind of just basic Bronte biography stuff that I was already aware of. I did read one story from the Miss Marple collection here because it's March Mystery Madness, right? So I've read The Tuesday Night Club, and I don't even really remember what happened. It wasn't a super memorable story. I just know that I did not solve it. But there are several stories in this book, maybe 20. It's the complete short stories of Miss Marple. So I'll probably read 1 or 2 before the month is over. And then I logged it in my Agatha Christie reading journal, which I showed you guys this the other day. I read another chapter of Meetings with Remarkable Manuscripts by Christopher de Hamel. That chapter was on the Book of Kells, and I thought that was neat how that fell in March, because, it's Ireland and this is Irish month, and, But I did not enjoy the voice of this chapter as much as I've enjoyed some of the others. I don't know why. The other 2 books that he talked about in the chapters 1 and 2, and I'm probably totally making this up, so I really can't even form this opinion until I get all the way through the book and see what his voice is like in other chapters. But in the first 2 chapters, they were on British held manuscripts anyway, and he was very fun about it, and he made it exciting and interesting, and just he felt very proud of these manuscripts, it seemed. When we got to the chapter on the Irish manuscript, there was a lot of sort of subtle mocking and just subtle commentary that made it sound, kind of presumptuous. Just a little bit, I don't know if arrogant is too harsh, but it just didn't have the same voice as the other 2 chapters. Now, that might not have been because it was a British man talking about Irish as opposed to a British man talking about British manuscripts. That might not necessarily be the case, but it is one of the things I wonder, why? Why did the voice change here? He was almost treating the Book of Kells as if it didn't need to have such notoriety. It wasn't as big of a deal as everybody was making it. And it's probably the most famous medieval manuscript, right? And so I don't know, maybe it was that. I have no idea, but something about it, his voice was just different. So we'll have to see how he treats manuscripts from other places, or even just Ireland. Maybe it's a British-Irish thing. I don't even know. If you're from England and you're getting really mad at me here, I apologize. I'm just ignorant. I'm not at all trying to offend anyone, but I just noticed a very distinct change in his tone and the sort of reverence that he had for the Book of Kells over these other manuscripts, and it seemed weird to me. But anyway, one of the things that I wanted to show you this because one of the things I like to do in my books when I'm studying them is I like to insert things. So this little section here was talking about the High Cross of St. Oran from the island of Iona, recently restored and redisplayed in the museum there. And so I can't remember exactly why he was talking about this, but I wanted to look into that. And so I did find a blog that talks about that. And so then I just like printed off and inserted these pages here. That's the, you know, they're trying to kind of put it together. And I just glued them in and inserted them. And this is something that I like to do to my books that I'm studying because it's just something like later on down the road, you know, I might want that information. So it's kind of like I could write all that in there as an annotation, but it's a lot easier just to glue that stuff in there. And that's actually a pretty old practice. I've read about, in fact, even in here, I've read about books that have things stuck into them, just added to them. And there's actually a term for it. I just can't remember. But anyway, I did enjoy reading this section on the Book of Kells. It's always been something that has interested me. And so, but one thing I did find that was interesting, he says that Trinity College in Dublin owns no fewer than 5 other early Irish gospel books, which are even older than the Book of Kells. Why is the Book of Kells popular? Probably because it's just really beautiful. It's very artistic. He thinks that it was not compiled necessarily to be studied by scholars, but instead to be a piece of art. I think that his evidence for that is kind of flimsy, and the way he presented it sounded kind of stuck up, but maybe. But it definitely is an art piece for sure. So yeah, I guess the book is broken into 4 different pieces now, and they display like 1 or 2 at a time. So that was interesting to learn. And then I also, this little side note says that according to James Ussher, who was a biblical scholar in the 16th and 17th century, according to him, the world was created on October 23rd, 4004, which happens to be my birthday. Not the 4004 part, but isn't that cool? I share a birthday with the world. All right, and then I've read another chapter and a half of In Search of the Dark Ages. This is another book that I'm reading for my medieval studies this year. And I read a chapter on Sutton Hoo, the King of Sutton Hoo. And then I am halfway through the chapter on Penda, who apparently was the last pagan king in England. And I started reading that last night, so I'll probably finish that tonight. And I've just been kind of doing some word studies on some of these ancient names. So I've got notes about that in my book. Really enjoying that. Another part of my medieval studies this year is the Sidney Psalter, which is a book of the Psalms rewritten by Philip and Mary Sidney, a brother and sister combo from the time of King James, Queen Elizabeth. The Bible study group I'm a part of, we are reading through the Psalms this year and studying them very slowly. And so as we read through those, each Psalm I'm reading from here as well. And then finally, I've been trying to get caught up on Notes from Walnut Tree Farm by Roger Deacon. Just a book about nature and his farm and life in England in the late 20th century, I would say. I have been trying to read this month by month, like in the corresponding months. So I, last night, finished January and I am on February 13th. So I'm catching up. Oh, I might be caught up by the end of April, but anyway, I started in October, so I'm trying to read around to October again. And that's it. That is my reading wrap up lately. I haven't started another novel since finishing the Emma books. I've just been reading little bits from my medieval studies, and I kind of have a feeling that's probably what I'll do this evening as well. What I usually tend to do, I find, is that I will read nonfiction for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and then I get the urge to read something fiction. And so then I'll read a fiction, maybe 2 in a row if they're on different subjects. And then I go back into reading nonfiction for weeks and weeks again. It's just, I prefer nonfiction. So I just find that, you know, once there's not a whole lot going on at home, like as far as holiday season or lots of travel or something like that, I really crave the nonfiction, the learning, more intellectual sort of reading over fictional reading. And then when things get all crazy and busy again, then I'm just like, oh, give me something that's light and fun and entertaining. And then I go for a fiction. So I do have a few more fictions on my goal list for this month. But I'm also sort of trying to make it a mood read March. And so it may be that I just continue on with my medieval studies for the rest of the month. I've got all of my books for my preschool, going back to preschool plan. If you haven't watched that video yet, you might want to. I talk all about my plan for just educating myself, filling in gaps that I missed over the years, and I'm starting with preschool. So all of my books have arrived, and now I'm ready to get started on that. So there will be updates for that. And for those of you who asked me to make that into a series, yes, I will make that into a series and mark it with the Self-Educated Mom Files little title there that I put in that first one. So you guys can find those, because I had quite a few people asking me if I would please make that a series and keep everyone updated. So I hope you guys are all doing really good. Thank you for watching. Thank you for visiting. Thank you for subscribing if you haven't yet. I will see you soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.